Imagine you find out that a very close friend of yours is actually skeptical of climate change. What content would you recommend them to watch? What would a video of public utility on climate change be like? What are the features of a message that make it a message of public utility? I have been making science communication content for almost a decade by now, and I'm quite ashamed to say that until recently I had never taken the time to really address this question and to come up with a list of criteria to identify top quality contents. For a long time I had been thinking that these questions were too easy, and as a result I did not bother to address them. But this all changed a year ago when a Google engineer reached out to me and asked me essentially these questions, but about COVID-19. Back in March 2020, what were the best videos to recommend to clarify the COVID-19 situation, the upcoming risks and the signs of the pandemic, and to call for the appropriate actions to take back then? What became obvious to me at that moment is that whether a video is factual is actually far from sufficient to determine whether it should be promoted at scale. Sure, a video that compared the total number of deaths by COVID-19 to the total number of deaths from the flu back in March 2020, such a video would have been completely factual. But clearly, it was not a video that seemed robustly beneficial to promote at scale. And this is because facts are not always of public utility, especially when they are cherry-picked to defend a dangerous narrative, or worse yet, when they are used to mislead the audience. But this is not all. Back then, the most reliable informational content about COVID-19 were probably academic talks given by virologists or epidemiologists, or reports from health authorities like the World Health Organization. But without any offense, such contents were also relatively boring to watch, at least for the general public. Moreover, they were overloaded with jargons and technical details that were meaningless for most people. And I mean, they should be, because experts should be talking using precise and optimized terminologies to facilitate communication between them. But then, clearly, it takes more than reliable information to make a video worth promoting at scale to billions of YouTube consumers. Okay, but what does it take? What makes a message a content of public utility that should be suggested to billions of individuals? In May 2020, these questions became critical as my collaborators and myself were setting up a platform called Tournesol. Tournesol aims to identify top videos of public utility by eliciting contributors' judgments on content quality. And today I'm going to report the list of quality criteria that we have come up with so far to help our contributors identify such videos. Actually, today I'm going to focus on the 3 default quality criteria of the platform, and I'm only going to briefly mention the 6 optional criteria. Note that you'll find more information and resources about the criteria on the Tournesol wiki. Moreover, our list is probably still incomplete and unsatisfactory, and we would love to hear your criticisms, suggestions, and ideas for improvements for our platform. Tournesol's first quality criterion has to do with the reliability of information, which typically requires it to be accompanied with trustworthy sources. Evidently, academic publications may be regarded as more reliable, but not all such publications have the same trustworthiness. Meta-analyses or scientific consensus should usually be regarded as more reliable, though even they should not be regarded as an absolute truth. Having said this, we stress that it is not sufficient for our content to contain factual information. The content should also be not misleading, and this turns out to be extremely challenging. Any communication will usually be focusing on a particular aspect of a wider topic, but by overemphasizing this particular aspect, they may be giving a very biased view of what matters about the topic. Typically, an article on nuclear energy that discusses the detail of the Chernobyl accident can indeed be very factual and reliable. But it may then leave the viewer with the flawed impression that nuclear energy is far more dangerous than other means of producing energy like oil or coal. More generally, to avoid being misleading, it seems important for our content to provide the general picture on a topic as well as the different theories that have been proposed to understand the topic, especially when the topic is controversial. Moreover, it should stress both the strengths and the weaknesses of all theories as best as possible. In particular, it should avoid straw manning. When there are different competing theories with a lack of scientific consensus, a reliable and not misleading message should not present only the interpretation of a single theory as though it was the only possible interpretation. Yet, even in physics, such dual interpretations happen all the time, even when there is a scientific consensus. Typically, many content will describe gravity as a force, even though general relativity does not describe it as a force. Arguably, if a content presents a fully Newtonian description of a mechanism without explicitly mentioning the fact that it is restricting itself to a Newtonian picture, which by the way is known to be incorrect, then the content can be regarded as at least slightly misleading. Additionally, especially on topics with large uncertainty such as COVID-19, a reliable and not misleading content should acknowledge and even stress its large uncertainty and the extent of its ignorance. In particular, contents that exhibit overconfidence, typically by claiming to describe a truth when there is a reasonable room for at least some doubt, then such contents should be regarded as at least slightly misleading. Overall, like all subsequent criteria that will be discussed, the reliable and not misleading criterion is far from being binary. This is why Tournesol proposes to judge it in a comparative manner. Namely, instead of asking contributors whether content is reliable and not misleading, Tournesol asks contributors to select two contents and to tell which of the two contents is more reliable and not misleading. Tournesol's second quality criterion is engaging and thought-provoking. Evidently, this is critical as the message must have to be able to catch the viewer's undivided attention, especially if it aims to communicate complex information that could not be understood otherwise. The audiovisual quality of a video is clearly important to do so. In particular, videos with poor sound quality are known to lose the audience's attention. The rhythm of the video and the use of humor or emotions can also be helpful to engage the viewers. However, catching the viewer's attention goes far beyond the audiovisual elements. One piece of advice from Veritasium is to lead with awesome. And this is particularly critical as many viewers quit after the first few seconds. Leading with awesome can be leading with the image of an experiment, but it can also be about starting with a compelling story or with a very intriguing question. And by the way, this is what I try to do for the video you're currently watching. According to the same video by Derek Muller, the tone of the presenter is also critical.
When I look back at my original videos, they all seem really subdued and my voice is really boring.
If the water is not pure, the impurities in the water naturally act as sites where the crystal can start forming.
Why am I talking like that? That's not how I normally talk. I had a producer on my first ABC shoot and he said to me, "Derek, you know how the camera adds 15 pounds? And I said, yeah. He said, well, it subtracts 20% of your enthusiasm.
More generally, even though I know that some scientists hate this, contents tend to be a lot more engaging when they are humanized, typically when the presenter is appreciated by their viewership and when the video tells the story of human heroes, like for instance human scientists. Of course, this has drawbacks, and on Tournesol we want you to tell us about these other drawbacks, for instance in terms of reliability or of how misleading such a presentation can be. To make contents even more engaging, it is also useful to encourage the viewer's participation, typically through polls about their opinions on a particular dilemma, or by giving them an interesting exercise to solve, or by asking them to send video responses to explain an observation. Now, on Tournesol, we value active engagement and active pondering. This means that it is even better if the engagement of the viewer leads them to further questions and increases their curiosity. This would typically be the case if, after consuming the contents, the reader is urged to discuss it with friends and to search for more information about the topic themselves. Contents that conclude with open questions or with links towards more complete explanations may thus be regarded as more engaging and thought-provoking. This may be particularly important on controversial topics, at least according to the studies by Dan Kahan and his colleagues. I'm not going to explain the details of their experiments, but essentially they found out that math skills can wreck our abilities to reason when the correct conclusion contradicts our convictions. Typically, beliefs about climate change can get worse if individuals get more educated. But interestingly, in another study, the researchers found out that scientific curiosity counteracts this phenomenon. Namely, more scientifically curious individuals agree more on factual topics even when the conclusions contradict their political convictions. More generally, the will to reach more accurate beliefs, even when these beliefs conflict with political convictions, is what Julia Galef calls the scout mindset. In this TED Talk, she exemplifies the scout mindset through the example of an anti-Semite French general who, despite his political convictions and his strong incentives to convict the Jewish suspect Albert Dreyfus, he nevertheless criticized his prejudices against Dreyfus, carefully analyzed the evidence at his disposal, and eventually concluded that Dreyfus was not guilty. The Scout Mindset is also the title of Julia Galef's book, which recently came out and which I strongly recommend given how engaging and thought-provoking it is. Contents that successfully trigger viewers' Scout mindsets are arguably more engaging and thought-provoking and more desirable to promote at scale. Tournesol's third quality criterion is called important and actionable. It asks how much of a priority the topic addressed by a message is and how crucial that a large audience be exposed to the message. The problem was particularly important in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, where a flood of information was invading social networks. Arguably early on, there was an overemphasis on some topic of secondary importance, like arguably the origin of the COVID-19, which was arguably less important to discuss than the basic and efficient measures to slow down the pandemic, such as staying at home, avoiding physical contacts, and ventilating closed areas. As another example, when it comes to mitigating climate change, asking viewers to switch off the light when not at home is orders of magnitude less important than, say, avoid flying to countries far away. A content that puts too much emphasis on the former would be regarded as less important than a content discussing the latter, or better yet, than a content that explains why the latter is far more important than the former. The importance of a topic seems in particular closely related to the scale of the issue and the effect sizes of potential interventions. In particular, if a small and actionable intervention can significantly improve the well-being of a huge number of individuals with high probability, then it should arguably be given a lot of attention. In particular, a content that explains it should thus be regarded as extremely important. This is why Tournesol is particularly focused on content recommendation algorithms. Such algorithms influence the beliefs and habits of billions of individuals on a daily basis, which then has major consequences for policy, public health, and national security. Yet it would suffice to slightly tweak this algorithm to potentially hugely improve public information, which would enable to, say, address climate change and pandemic mitigation much more effectively. In particular, by promoting important information, Tournesol hopes to combat the major issue of mute news. These mute news are news that discuss highly important and actionable data or ideas, but that fail to get the attention they should have because they are intentionally or unintentionally drowned into an ocean of much less relevant information. Of course, there would be a lot more to say about the different quality criteria chosen by Tournesol, about their relevance, and more importantly, about their limits. But one way to overcome these limits is to also rate videos according to the optional quality criteria. Unfortunately, to avoid making this video too long, I will only present the optional quality criteria very succinctly. The fourth quality criterion is whether a content encourages better habits, either explicitly or implicitly. These can include healthier habits, for instance in terms of food, sport activities or mental health, or other good habits such as careful thinking when consuming informational content. This can also include habits that are better for society at large, such as being kinder to others, including on the internet, reducing our carbon footprint, or being wary of our overconfidence. The fifth quality criterion is whether a content is clear and pedagogical. In particular, does it accompany the viewer's thought process and will it lead them carefully step by step through a potentially complex reasoning? Does it correct the viewer's most likely misconceptions and does it make good use of cognitive empathy? The sixth quality criterion is layman friendly, namely it asks whether the content is suitable to those who know nearly nothing about the topic discussed. Would a 5-year-old understand what is being said? Now, you might think that this is the same as clear and pedagogical, but our current data show that these two considerations are nearly orthogonal according to our contributors' judgments. The prototypical instance of a pedagogical content that is not layman-friendly is essentially any video by 3Blue and Brown, like say the one on baseball written with odds. The seventh quality criterion is diversity and inclusion. We believe this to be critical to attract a wide variety of profiles and viewpoints, in order especially to avoid blind spots. This is particularly the case for topics where there is an unfortunate historic important bias, such as computer science, which is unfortunately currently dominated by certain subpopulations rather than others. The 8th quality criterion is resilience to backfiring risks. This is particularly crucial on controversial topics. Will the content offend some viewers? Will it lose the good intention of those whose beliefs are questioned by the content? Unfortunately, many studies suggest that this will be the case for most contents, which may reinforce each side of a debate in their own beliefs. Typically, a 2018 study showed that Twitter users who were made to follow a bot that retweets automatically tweets from the other political side, these users actually reinforced their attachment to their own side and their hate for the opposite side. Tournesol aims to identify contents that do not lead to this arguably undesirable outcome. Finally, the 9th quality criterion is entertaining and relaxing. Evidently, YouTube is sometimes consumed by viewers who are somewhat tired, in which case they may prefer a content that is not too cognitively demanding. So there you go, you now know all 9 quality criteria that Tournesol has chosen so far. Now, changing this list is a bit challenging because it's unclear how to then interpret the data that we have collected so far. Nevertheless, we are more than willing to update the platform if there is a great need for this. What we care most about on Tournesol is collecting the best possible database in order to facilitate the research on the ethics of content recommendation. So, if you have any proposal for improvement, we would love to hear it. In particular, please let us know if there's some important quality criterion that is not captured by those we have so far and thus should be added to our list. And to do this well, I encourage you to rate videos on Tournesol yourself. From my personal experience, this helps a lot to realize what these criteria represent in concrete cases, which on a personal level has actually led me to many interesting reflections. And I know that this is also the experience of other Tournesol contributors. In particular, after rating a video according to Tournesol's criteria, is there something you still want to say about the videos that you have not been able to express using the current quality criteria? Overall, if you really want to help Tournesol better address the ethics of content recommendation, I urge you to go to the tournesol.app platform to download our Google Chrome or Firefox extensions or to use our Android application. Please use any of these to judge a lot of YouTube videos. Tournesol will be extremely grateful for your upcoming contributions.